Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Lounge Alley. This is Figure Drawing Basics Part 81. I am your host, and I am going to continue with where I left off yesterday. So this might be actually, there will be one more model, and I'm going to move on to a different part of this chapter. So I'm going to take some time and actually flesh this out some more, finish it up really. I don't want to leave it halfway done really. I want to put in some effort, despite me primarily doing this to help you guys and give you some tips and tricks on what you can do to improve your work. I also do find this to be a good practice for me as well. I'm never opposed to it. I don't think I'm ever too good to practice anything or to review things myself, and to level up, in cases like this, I could level up my shading skills. I could level up my attention to detail, noticing things. There's always room to improve, I believe, especially when it comes to drawing, when it comes to like any art form, or pretty much anything you could think of. Like, let's say if you are in the academic field, what area would you consider one that has like a limit to how much you could do to improve? No matter, even if you got like your master's or whatever, I still believe, you should always stay open to more information, understanding more, discovering more, because I think sometimes people get caught up in this idea that now I have achieved, let's say I've achieved masters in this, so nothing should be questioned. Nobody should, or I shouldn't question anything else. Like, I have achieved the pinnacle of knowledge when it comes to this topic, or I know more than anybody else. So I think sometimes people find a lot of comfort in that, and they just kind of close the book on they kind of close the book on gaining more knowledge, and they just kind of revel in that achievement. And I think that stagnates a lot, because essentially what you're doing it for is for the love of whatever that craft is. So even if you're in like the scientific field, there's always room to learn. So especially in that field, that I think it just becomes danger zone when you become way too comfortable in that achievement of becoming really good at something, or really, really reputable, or whatever it is, because then you forget that essentially why you became that is because of your curiosity, your thirst for knowledge, your desire to understand or to learn more, etc., that sort of thing. And the same thing can be applied for the artistic field, especially let's say you published a book or you exhibited or whatever it is. I think it's very easy to get caught up in that and focus way more on that popularity, on that achievement, than on pushing yourself to learn more, improve your craft or whatever it is. Especially like, let's say you're exhibiting a piece of work or a body of work, and there's similarity to all of them. You can get caught up in just doing the same kind of work because you had an opportunity to exhibit, as opposed to pushing yourself further and being like, okay, I got a chance to exhibit, now let me see how I can push myself even further and discover or learn or create something different, something new, rather than giving into like a gimmicky sort of approach to art. So I don't knock it. I don't think it's terrible. I'm not going to say, oh, this person's a terrible human being, their art sucks because they do that. It's not the point. I just think that you can gain so much more from just pushing yourself even further, not getting caught in the wind of fame and recognition and achievement and all that stuff. I think it's way more rewarding that you push yourself further to the next level. You continue to grow, you continue to improve and hone your craft and all that. So yeah, in this case, I do want to improve this. I do want to work on it some more. I don't want to turn the page just to quickly move on to the next, because honestly, I really enjoy this. Like, I understand shading, I understand shadow play and all that, but just the rendering aspect of it, again, just drawing is a great time. I really enjoy it. And yeah, there was a period where I just kind of forgot about that. And I think a lot of it has to attribute to the fact that it wasn't a habit. It wasn't a habit, and I also didn't take the advice that I am now giving, which is don't think about, how you feel, whether you feel inspired or not, whether you should do it now or whatever. Just doing it, just sitting down and just doing it. Oops. This is kind of why I'm hesitant to move closer towards the paper, because it does allow me to see more detail, but in that action, I end up having the mic obstruct the vision, get into the camera. But yeah, again, just really enjoying the craft, really enjoying the process, and I don't really see a reason to move that quickly, move on to the next page. There's a lot more to cover, that's for sure. Forgot to move the light source so that this is something I haven't covered in a while. It's important when you're doing work traditionally to really consider the light source, not only when we're talking about the drawing itself and like where the shadows form, but on that topic of shadows forming, it's important to cast the light in the opposite direction of the pencil, because take a look at what the shadow does, right? You see that? The pencil, because the light source is on this side, on the right side, on the same side as the pencil, is casting a shadow on the paper. And that becomes a nuisance, that in some way it kind of obstructs vision, whereas you'll notice, even play it around with yourself. You need a good light source. You need to see what you're doing. You need to see what the subject looks like. So pay attention to that. That's something you could easily overlook because you're kind of trying to get the drawing done, or you're focusing more on the subject rather than what's going on the paper. So just in that topic, it's tricky. There are quite a few things to pay attention to when you're doing things traditionally. There's also a reflection as well that I noticed, and I don't know, maybe this is me being meticulous, but I think you'll get there eventually as well. The more you focus, the more you pay attention to detail, the more you're involved in your own process, you'll start to figure certain things out that are more convenient for you, that get you in a groove, that put you in a zone, basically. But yeah, I'd say another thing that happens is reflection. So sometimes the pencil might be waxy, or the paper might be a little bit waxy, and depending on the light source, it could actually shine more on those areas and kind of make it harder for you to see, like, where you should form shadows. So light source is very, very important in the process. It also like determines your motivation in some ways, because you might be in that state and things are coming off wrong and you're just like kind of struggling with it and you're not really noticing what, without realizing that it's these things, like the quality of the paper. The paper might be kind of waxy as well, or it might be too thin, or it might be too thick, it might be too coarse. The proper term for it is tooth. Like if it's a more of a medium tooth, or a rough tooth, or a fine tooth paper, meaning like the texture. If there's texture, is it smooth? Is it coarse? For me, I'd rather just use that as opposed to talking about teeth. But yeah, if you guys take a look at sketchbooks, and the reason why I bring that up is because I've been looking at sketchbooks and I'm trying to find the exact same one as this one. I noticed that it's harder to find, actually. Like I could find this exact same one, but I can't find it in a bigger size. Something, let's say 8.5 by 11, or something about this size. Can't seem to find it, and it's really important to find the same thickness, because as you guys noticed, or for those of you who are just tuning in for the very first time, I use it for multiple things. I don't use it only just for sketching. As you guys can see, I'm also using it for inking. I'm using it for coloring. I use watercolor. Then I transitioned into doing India inks, and it's important that this paper has that thickness to be able to do it. This, forget about it. This is flimsy paper. I'm beginning to understand why I abandoned a lot of sketchbooks throughout my time, and probably was like it was kind of like unconscious as I was talking about it. Like, I probably was just unmotivated by the sketchbook, so I just moved on to a new one without really knowing exactly what caused the unmotivation from it. But I guess because I've experienced so many different sketchbooks, or there were times where, I was like drawing, or I was like taking a live drawing class and I wanted to take a live drawing class and I didn't have my sketchbook on me, so I'd have to go out and buy one. And I just, picked up a sketchbook that I just wanted or liked or appealed to me at the moment. And through this whole collection of all these different sketchbooks, I just realized, like, I prefer to draw more on this type of paper, whereas if I just stuck to one type of, because a lot of people do that sometimes. They just get fixated on brand or something and they don't deviate from it. But through this various sketchbook kind of journey, I was able to discover, like, I prefer this kind of paper. I'm not going to say that this paper is wrong for everybody. For me personally, because I like to work with different mediums, because I want it to be thick, and I don't want to see anything on the other side of the paper, I prefer something thick like this. But yeah, so through that discovery of like just randomly picking up different sketchbooks, not really being committed to a brand or anything like that, I was able to figure out what really appeals to me. And I encourage you guys to do the same thing. Don't just take my word for it. Experiment yourself. Pick up different types of sketchbooks and see how it works for you. Because there's some people who aren't doing this stuff. For instance, if you're doing graffiti, like cool graffiti, not just scribbles and stuff, like actual pieces and stuff. Like if you're doing something like that, you might want to use thicker paper because it'll give you a chance to do it on all over the page, flip it, use the other side of the paper for it as well. And you're going to be using, markers, you're going to be using inks, you're going to be using all sorts of mediums. maybe you might even use glue and like glue collages, right? Like take pictures and combine them together, so that paper would have to withstand that liquid often. So you might not, it might not matter to you that it's coarse, but you need it to be thick, you know. So if it's coarse, it doesn't matter because you're using markers anyways. You know, for me, using graphite on coarse paper, it's like, I don't know, it's like using a cheese grater or something. It completely grinds the pencil, and it shows really rough looking lines, which I don't like. It's not my thing. But yeah, like I was saying, depending on what you're doing, depending on what you're going to be using it for, I highly encourage you guys to experiment. There's a sketchbook for everything, really. And it's one shop that I love going into. So I encourage you guys to actually, if you live around an area where there's a sketchbook close by, or even take a trip, you know, why not? If you're driving, that's a drive worth taking. You know, if you're really into drawing, if you're into illustration, it's a fun time to go and like look at things. You might want to buy something else that's going to inspire you to draw. And I think that's one of the reasons why I really liked going to the stores, aside from just being able to actually feel the paper, look at the pencils and like play around with them, or look at the colors, or talk to people and like you know, talk to them about the mediums, and talk to them about what's best for what, or whatever, you know, making conversation, discovering certain things. It's a great time. Yeah, I'm not big on like, I don't like clothes shopping, even though that's another thing that you have to kind of go and do. You can't do it online, or at least you could, but it's just a pain in the ass. Like for me, I just I want to go and like try these things on rather than just continuously do this whole return thing. That with Amazon or whatever. But with art supplies, it's fun. It's fun to go and just look at the stuff, and the store is pretty cool. Usually they have everything laid out, so it's great to be able to just explore that stuff. And I always have a great time. I always feel really inspired after leaving the store to come back home and sit down and do some work in the new sketchbook, or use the new pencil, or whatever it is that I found over there. And they usually have some books there too, which is pretty cool. At least I hope that's a thing that they still do. I have not been to an art store in a while, I'll be honest. And I hope that more art stores open up, you know, that it's not going to only be these giants. You know, there's like Blick, and then there's Utrecht and Michaels, I think, but just like independent ones as well. If they make a deal with people who also have art books and just have like an art book section, like why not? That's a great collaboration. You know, you're in helping artists and those who publish their work, and in return they're giving you guys a lot of customers. So for those of you who want to be entrepreneurs, open up an art store, see how many people you can get to back that up. You know, I'm sure there are a lot of people out there who are publishing books and stuff, would love to have their books there as well. It's a cool job to have, you know, if you're working as somebody who helps people find stuff or whatnot. It's I think it's a good investment. despite everything being online, there are just certain things that cannot be substituted for like the in-person experience. And I think art stores are one of them, that's for sure. So I didn't go over it real quick, but this, for those of you who are just tuning in for the very first time, this is a model showing what the light source is here and what the face looks like in that light source. So if you guess that the light source is coming from the back and it's above, you're absolutely right, because that's exactly what it is. It's a challenging one because it's very much the change is very subtle. You know, it's a lot of shadow play here. It's hard to distinguish between shadow and midtone almost, because it's all pretty much in the dark. But obviously the bridge of the nose is catching any light that forms, because it is still coming. There is still light coming from the top, you know, back or whatnot. So as I mentioned before, it's not like water. You know, the light beam is going straight, as opposed to like water taking the shape of whatever it is being poured into or on top of, or whatever it is. So anything that jots itself out to catch the beam is gonna do it. So the nose, being the most prominent feature on a face, is gonna jot out enough to actually catch some light, whereas everything else, it's in the shadow form. It's in the shadow area. So even though, despite the face having distinct features, if the light source is coming from here, it's still relatively flat in comparison to the roundness of the top of the head. You know, it doesn't just continue to be at an angle, being able to catch more light. It curves inwards. So if the light source is from the back, as you could see how the nose is able to catch, even on this face, notice different features, not exactly the same, right? But still the light functions the same way on it, and the features on the face are similar to it. So any part that jots out, you could see the nose obviously jots out, parts of the lip, right? Because it swoops upwards and out. So coming from the inside, it swoops out and then curves inwards for the lips. So you're going to catch some light there, or you're going to get some light, slight light, depending on how extreme it is. So as you see, the further away or downwards I angle the face, the less light is able to penetrate. The only light source is on the tip of the nose, similar to how you see it here. So just something to pay attention to. You know, these are fundamental principles. You know, this isn't stylistic. This isn't something that's, you know, objective or subjective, rather. It is objective. It's an objective truth to when it comes to how the light hits the face and what's revealed in the light and what's in shadow. It's an objective truth, regardless of the face features, regardless of the gender, age, whatever it is just how things happen on the face with the light source being in that angle. And for those of you who are just tuning in for the very first time, these are all the different angles that I covered, and you guys can check these videos out along with all the other videos leading up to this one by heading over to the video section and filtering it based on collection, which is going to reveal to you guys folders for each of the streams. And in those folders, you could go back as far as episode 1. In fact, I encourage you. There's some interesting content in the first episodes for each of these streams. For the project stream, for coloring, for figure drawing, for drawing comics. Each of them have a pretty interesting introduction. So check those out. Those are fun. But yeah, what you're looking at over here are the different busts, and they're all demonstrating different light sources. So in this case, you would see it straight on the face with just shadows underneath the nose and underneath the chin forming. Of course, there are more shadows, but it's a lot more subtle as opposed to what you're seeing obviously here and in some of these other examples, like this one, for example. And then moving on to this one, this is an example of the light source being these small busts are demonstrating the light source in the extreme form. The light source is directly coming on the right side of the face, not front right, not like angled like you will see here, but directly on the right side. So, in this example here, you could see it's only hitting this side of the face. And then everything else is in shadow, similar to how you see it here. So for those of you who just tuned in for the very first time, this is a clay model that I sculpted. I encourage you guys to venture into sculpting as well. It really does help translate into drawing, being able to understand the face better, because you're actually touching all the features, you're molding all the features together, you're understanding why certain things are the way they are. You really get a hands-on understanding and experience when it comes to face features. You have to angle it a certain way to make sure things are right. You also have to understand the skeletal structure, why these are here the way that they are, and why you need to actually layer it, and why they should be jutting out as opposed to what's underneath it, and then understanding the jaw area. So it's going to push you to really question what's underneath this, what's underneath, what goes on top of it. So through that process, you'll learn more and more about the face, and it's really fun. It's a great time. I had a total blast going into it. And clay isn't really that expensive. As I mentioned frequently, it's probably like $10 or something, maybe a little bit more, but you get a pretty big block and you could play around with it and create all these different things. There's tutorials out there. If you guys are interested in seeing a clay tutorial on the Art Lounge Alley, send me a message, leave some comments, let me know if you guys want to actually see from start to finish the process and how I actually go about it. Still got some clay left, so I could do probably another model, maybe a female model. But yeah, if you guys are interested, leave a comment, send me a message, and I'll write you back. All right, so yeah, just going back to this, in that example, as you saw, it's extreme light source. Obviously, this isn't something that you would see in the daytime, right? You wouldn't see this sort of light source in the daytime at all, unless you're in some area that is obstructing any sort of light and only part of your face is being revealed to the sun, but that again has to be very extreme as well, because you would have to be very close to the object that's going to obstruct the light. So maybe I want to say if you're you have your face hidden behind something while the other side of it is revealing itself to natural light. But this is an example of just extreme form of light, like let's say a lamp or some overhead or something like that, or flashlight or whatever. But really it's just to demonstrate what happens to the face when the light source is in that direction. So this is an extreme form. This is what it really looks like. This is something you might even see during nighttime, if there is lamps around or whatever. So it's more likely that you would see something like that there, like this during that time. But as you could see, the other half is in shadow, and some part of the chin is getting some light. Underneath the lip, it's getting shadows. underneath the nose is definitely going to get shadows, and the left side, the bridge of the nose, and the length of the nose as well. I wouldn't say this is like the bridge of the nose, but I guess the long side of the nose is going to get shadow on the left side. So shadows are always going to form on the opposite side of the light source. And so just continuing on, shadows are going to be underneath the eyes as well, because that, just like the head, it curves inwards. So the more inwards it curves, the less likely it's going to capture any light, and whatever is at the peak is going to get more of it. So in this case, it would be the eyelid. Because there is thickness to the eyelid, you're going to see a thin line catching some light. And it's also reflective, like your eyes are kind of watered, right? There's some liquid there. So because of the reflection, it's also going to cast a little bit of light on that eyelid area. Also, the top eyelid is going to get some highlights as well, because again, it jots out more than any other feature in this area. And because it's a socket, it's going to catch a lot of shadow above it. Same thing here, because it's a socket, it's set deep in. This area is gonna capture the light source instead of it being able to travel in this area, because the light source is from the top, or the left top side. All right, moving on to this one. And I'm gonna try to do real quick ones, because again, you guys can check out the previous streams to figure it out. This is the left side. This is more of a natural light, I'm gonna say. It's closer to natural light. This would be also another one that's close to natural light. You could see that the gradations are a lot more smoother. It's not as extreme as you see here, from shadow to light very quickly. This is what happens when the light source is from the bottom. So this is like more of like a flashlight scene, or something where it's really dark in a room and the light source is coming from the bottom up, like candlelight or something. And it's pretty much reversed to everything else. So areas that usually would be in shadow, like underneath the nose, the top lip, the sockets, all that is reversed in this case. As you can see, the sockets are getting light. Underneath the nose, it's getting light. The top lip is getting light, and the chin area, which usually is in shadow, is now getting light. So yeah, that was pretty much it. This is what you're looking at now. This is the final one, I'm gonna say, for this bust example. And yeah, this example just shows how everything is in shadow and the light source is really coming from the back. I'll be honest, I'm not going to spend too much time on this example because it's pretty much what you're seeing. There's no real need for any detail aside from the fact that, okay, you know the light source is from the back. So predominantly, I'm just going to spend a little bit more time rendering this. And there's one other drawing that I'm going to spend time on before moving into to the next topic. And always, guys, if you need more understanding, or if you feel like you need better explanation, reach out. Send me a message, post your question in chat. I'll be happy to give you a better explanation, highlight some things. As I mentioned, it's always fun for me to review this stuff. Now, another thing that's really challenging about this is because you have to really compare shadows. Like, you have to compare and say, How dark is this compared to this? Are they the same darkness? Because the moment you make one area too dark, whereas it should match the darkness of something else, it's gonna break the drawing a bit. It's not gonna make as much sense as if you were to really pay attention to that detail. Because again, this is based off of light source. You know, it's not just individual light hitting certain areas of the face. It's one light source. So it all should just unify together. It should all just make sense. So for instance, if this is in a lot of shadow, then this should be even darker because it's underneath the chin. So if this isn't getting any light, there would be even less light underneath the chin. So you want to make sure that makes sense as well. You know, and that really pops out your drawing. It gives it more dimension. And all this time I've really just been layering things because I wanted to get to a stage where I feel confident with the features, how they're drawn out, the proportion, the anatomy, making sure everything is on the same line, as in the eyes are on the same line, the brows are on the same line, the nose, the nostrils are on the same line, prior to committing to like really pressing down and developing shadows at the tone that they really are. Because if I make that mistake, right, if I make it too dark and then I recognize like, oh crap, it should be moved in over here, now it's going to be such a pain to erase all that, if it's even possible. You know, at that point, after pressing so hard on the paper, it's less likely you'll be able to do a clean erase. You're either going to have to like just eat that mistake or start over. But it's a good habit to get into, to layer things for that specific reason. And to also just gradually work on improving the drawing as you go. So despite this getting a lot of light, it's still not as white as the paper. And this is something that I mentioned earlier. When you're rendering things, when you're coloring things, if you're doing realism, you don't want to have high contrast on the face because it flattens the drawing. Simply because areas on the face end up being the same as the background on the paper. So that just immediately flattens it when there is that connection. So you want to make sure that nothing is as white as the paper. I would say like just tiny bits of highlight, you know, like just a smidge somewhere, like tip of the nose, or depending on where the light source is, because it's not always going to be at the tip of the nose. I'm gonna say probably tomorrow And then Monday is going to be the last day that I'm going to spend on this topic. For now, there's going to be points where there's going to be different examples probably. And I can review all these ideas, light source and such, shading. But what you should be taking away from this is the gradual process of rendering, right? Just not going immediately from like really light to incredibly dark shadows, and just layering things. So layering is one thing, and the second one is obviously light source for each face. And again, guys, you can't learn this stuff from just me talking about it. You have to practice it. So despite me pointing out a lot of this stuff and talking about it and giving you an explanation of it, you have to practice. Your hand-eye coordination has to sync when it comes to that. It's similar to that concept that I was giving earlier, like the idea of, let's say, learning a math problem. I could just tell you what the answer is. You're not going to know how to do it though on your own. So in the same way, you have to figure out how to do this for yourself as well. And the only way you could do that is by actually practicing it and developing that hand-eye coordination, developing that attention to detail that's going to produce your own kind of results. These guides are here just to help you pay attention to things as you're drawing. Like, drawing is a thinking process, despite how it might be portrayed as this like magical thing for some of you, where it's like it's intuitive, they just sit down and create things. Like it could be, but it is a lot of thinking. You do have to think about it. So that's what the videos are there for, to help you guys think through and pay attention and keep things in mind, certain things in mind as you're developing the skill for yourself. It's kind of like, also like exercising or something. It's like if somebody explains to you how to do the exercises and what muscle groups are being targeted, you think that tomorrow you're going to wake up with muscles. That wouldn't, that's not going to work. You actually have to go in, you have to practice this stuff. You got to go and you got to do the exercises and you got to lift the weights yourself, and then you'll see the results then. It's the same idea here. Like, there are no shortcuts to it. Even though a lot of the stuff I'm trying to explain as best as I can, it's still not gonna improve your ability to render things and pay attention to detail yourself. Like, that's up to you guys. That's why it's very commonly said, practice. Just practice as much as possible. I can't tell you how many times I've had students, like really young students, come in. Granted, they're like 10, 11 or whatnot, and they see certain drawings and they're like, I want to do that, and they get really disappointed when they see a demonstration done, and then they sit down and they try to do it and they can't. It's not coming out for them the same way. They get so disheartened and disappointed by it. But it's something that I have to explain to them very often, is that there is no shortcut to it. I can't tell you certain things that are going to magically make you better at drawing, better at creating these lines, recognizing these details. Like, that's a muscle memory thing. That's a hand-eye coordination thing. It's all coming from practice. And I think it's also something that a lot of people, this is something that I talked about as well, like when people hire artists, you know, they're just like, oh, it shouldn't take you long to do that. You know, or they see you drawing it and so effortless that they're just like, oh, it's so easy. Why would I pay a lot of money when it's like they barely do any work for themselves? And it's just, it's ridiculous. It's the same mentality. It looks effortless because the person spends so many years, or, you know, they're dedicating so much of their time to improve the craft to be able to do it quickly. I'm not going to say, the reason I hesitate to say years is because sometimes if you spend, let's say you spend 7 hours every day drawing for 7 months, you're going to see some amazing results. You know, you're going to probably see a lot better results than somebody who drew for like 3 years, but they only drew from time to time. Like they drew like sporadically. 1 week they would spend a lot of time, then 2 weeks they don't draw. Then, you know, one week they draw 3 days and then they don't draw at all. You know, when it's at that sort of approach, somebody who spends way more time, way more hours every day probably ends up drawing a lot better. Their drawings improve dramatically in comparison to the other person. Now, that has nothing to do with better or worse. It's just to say how to improve, you know, how to improve the skill, how to improve the ability to render things or whatever else. That's really the idea. How much do you want to get better? And again, you know, going back to that exercise analogy, like if you only go and work out once a week, you know, you do a couple of lifts here and there or whatever exercises here and there, and then you go back home, and then for a week you don't exercise, you're less likely going to see results as opposed to somebody who goes 3 times a week and they really put in a good amount of time. So it really just comes down to that. All right, everybody. I am going to take a short break. I'm going to get ready for the next stream, which is Coloring Comics. You guys are going to see me working in this sketchbook, coloring Conan the Barbarian. And gave you guys a little quick sneak peek before. This is what I'm going to be working on. So I'm going to be continuing on with this page after this 5-minute break. If you guys enjoy this content, remember to hit the like and subscribe button. They both would be greatly appreciated. And stick around. I'll be back in 5.